Chapter 5, Guinea Pigs. Clavemont High School, Clavemont, Georgia. August 8th, 1998. Brian stands at his locker, putting away his literature textbook and notes folder. Unlike many of the other students, his locker isn't decorated with folders of hanging out with friends, magazine clippings, or any other items. Empty except for his school books and supplies, Brian's locker is simple and organized, similar to how he tries to keep his own thoughts and studies. From behind, he hears the recognizable laughter of Butch Harper. Butch's laugh is loud enough that it reaches over all other conversations, so that everyone must stop and acknowledge him. Ever a narcissist, his personality grinds on Brian. The teen keeps his mouth shut tightly. Should he ever speak out to the guy that runs the school, he will receive a beatdown so epic, all those prior will pale in comparison. So then I said, yeah? They give me those shoes instead. Get it? Those shoes? Butch laughs even louder, while two other seniors in Letterman jackets beside him take a moment of thought at the punchline before joining in. Quietly closing his locker, Brian attempts to slip past them, making as little noise as possible. Hey shithead, where you going? Butch shouts. Come here. Trying to pretend he doesn't hear Butch, Brian continues to walk. Angrily, Butch jogs past him to cut off the other teen's escape. With a backhand, Brian is knocked to his back, scattering his possessions across the hallway. Blood runs down his nose and he looks up in terror. I thought you were smart, Butch laughs, looking down at him with a lustful look of hatred in his eyes. When did you decide you were important enough to ignore me when I have something to say to you? Pulling him back up to his feet by the front of his shirt, Butch prepares to begin punching Brian as he does almost every day. Leave him alone, ass-face, Lucy shouts, walking up to them from her own locker. Butch turns, glaring at the interruption. Stay out of it, Miss Piggy. Your boyfriend needs to learn some manners. About to speak up again, Lucy is silenced by Stacy, who slaps the books out of her hands as the girl bends down to pick up her belongings. Stacy delivers a hard knee to the face. Lucy reels back, the bridge of her nose torn open and bleeding. Fat bitch needs to learn her place as well, Stacy laughs, standing over the crying girl. Smiling, Butch looks back over to Brian again before kicking him in the face. The boy crumbles beneath Butch's strength, and he curls into a fetal position to protect himself from further assault. Seeing this as the boy's submission, Butch spits on him with disgust and loses interest. The bully instills such great fear in Brian that all he can think of is damage mitigation. His interest lost, Butch and his friends leave Brian and Lucy lying alone in the hallway. Fear and shame is thick in the air, and neither victim wishes to speak about their experience. You okay? Brian asks, helping his friend to her feet after he finally finds the strength of his own to stand. Want to switch? I doubt Butch could hit any harder. Lucy tries to make light of her injuries, but neither can laugh due to the pain they feel. I saw both of them headed the other way, so I think we're safe to walk home. We at least may be able to get good enough head start on them to get to my house. Butch and Stacy slip into the boys' locker room and head back into the showers. With classes over and football practice just about to begin, the room is empty. After 10 minutes, the teens separately exit the locker room, and Butch leaves to head to football practice. Often, Butch likes to have his head clear before starting practice, and his girlfriend Lisa is too busy getting ready for her own practice to accommodate him. She has told him no repeatedly, saying that he would get her all sweaty and covered in gross, and she couldn't deal with that before practice. Stacy, however, has never turned Butch down for a quick tussle. Instead of heading directly to practice, Butch makes his way back to the administrative building. It doesn't take him long to jimmy the lock to Mr. Priest's office and enter. Lying on the principal's desk are the day's attendance roster sheets for each instructor, as well as lunch and PE counts. A different student would try to change his or her grade or remove disciplinary records. Yet Butch merely swipes the sheets, as well as the red emergency action plan folder, from a case nearby the filing cabinet. Leaving as swiftly as he entered, Butch hurries down the hall and out of the school to deliver his items as asked. Not paid to ask questions, he doesn't care to know why his new employer wants the attendance rosters, but he equally doesn't care enough to not comply. Rick Swanson exits the taxi in front of the megalithic Conco building and cranes his neck back in awe. "It's enormous," he whispers. The young man enters the lobby and is immediately compelled to glance down a hallway leading to what appears to be an exit into a courtyard of some kind. A muscular, dark-skinned man stands in the hall, equally fixated on the young man. Their eyes lock in a silent duel until Rick feels as if his body has been submerged in an ice bath. Strange. That man's presence is frightening. I knew Khan had some hired thugs guarding this place, but I didn't expect anyone in that league, he thinks as he walks over to the reception desk. Shesha grins, pulling out his cellular phone and making a quick call. "Sir, you need to come downstairs. I believe we have an ideal candidate for the GX program." Rick leans over the desk, trying to get the attention of the attractive blonde, as she ignores his arrival. "I said, I'm here about the internship position. You know, the one you advertised in the newspaper?" She ignores him, instead filing her nails and causing the young man's anger to shoot through the roof. Volatile temperament runs throughout his family, and he does his best to keep it in check. His little brother was the worst of all, but Rick pushes the thoughts of Thomas aside and focuses on the task at hand. "What's going on, Rebecca?" Khan asks, walking over to the desk. "I think this brat wants a job, but he doesn't look a day over 14 to me," she says, smacking her gum loudly. Rick grinds his teeth in irritation. His tan complexion and smooth features are regarded as beauty in his family, and everyone in his bloodline has a youthful appearance. He takes the insult as one directed towards his entire family tree, and balls his fist tightly before catching himself in his anger and taking deep breaths to relax. "I'm actually 18, ma'am," Rick replies, forcing politeness. Shesha approaches and leads in to whisper into Khan's ear. The boy's energy is astounding. In his agitated state, his aura almost doubled in intensity. "Pull a full scan for analysis." Shesha nods, leaving them. "What kind of job was it that you were seeking? We deal in advanced sciences here, and no offense, but without at least a master's degree, I don't believe you could keep up as even a research assistant." "Give me a chance to prove you wrong. I'm a lot more capable than most my age." "I'll bet you are." Khan smiles, and then pauses as his phone begins to vibrate. "Hold on a second, please." His output is equivalent to 4,500 adenosine liamide. The parasite could easily boost him over 20,000 ADL, Shesha says on the other end. "Really? That would nearly surpass any member of the Special Operations Force. I think this is a one-of-a-kind opportunity." Khan closes his phone and smiles at Rick. "How good are you at making coffee and taking down notes?" the CEO asks. "Sir," Rick smiles, "I am a Nobel laureate in coffee preparation and note-taking." "Excellent. On the 3rd floor you will find and speak with a young woman named Lynn Jordan. She will be your superior, and you will report directly to her each morning at 7 a.m. Follow her around and attend to her every need. If she asks you to wipe, you ask her how many squares, understood?" 10-4, Rick says with a nod. The usage of military lingo is not lost on Khan, who files it into the back of his mind for later. "I will discuss payroll with Miss Jordan later this afternoon, and go over the details with you then. Good luck." With that, Khan leaves to go about his daily rounds through the building. Eventually, he returns to his office where Shesha is already waiting for him, despite the office having been previously locked. Khan is about to protest but bites his tongue and ignores the eccentric warrior's intrusion. "That boy will soon become a prized asset," Shesha says. "And if he becomes uncontrollable?" Then I'll kill him, Shesha grins, revealing his fangs. The excitement transforms his eyes into the reptilian form. Do you think he will be more useful than the Sakari boy? Him? Shesha asks, thinking of Jake, now locked away in their facility outside of town. It's too early to tell what will become of him. As far as I know, Dr. Smith hasn't even looked him over yet. I want every detail as soon as they become known. Powers this great must be harnessed and not allowed to roam unchecked. Tens of thousands of years ago. The air tastes bitter, a sour, rotting meat taste that requires all focus not to lose the contents of one's stomach over. Several others raise their heads to the sky, breathing in the foul odor. The eldest of the Vitir instructs the others to stay away and not to investigate the source. The humans have brought this fate upon themselves. We cannot help them now, says Elch, a large white reindeer-like creature with red eyes. Growling, the blue-furred wolf Amarok protests. If we do not stop their slaughter, they will become a danger to us all. None of us are involved in this war, yet we take heavy casualties. Neither the Yazata nor the Aesir care of our fates. The humans do not even belong here. They were brought against their will to this place. Can they truly be faulted for fighting back? Because of their aberrance, each death becomes an imbalance in this world's life force. Their spirits quickly warp and become creatures that we have never seen before. We must withdraw not only from this conflict, but from this world. Our home has become soiled, and even now pollutes our souls. We cannot allow the human's taint to touch us further. You would give up your home rather than fight for it? Amarok growls loudly. I will never just give up and roll over. I will fight for everything I believe in. The elder looks down on Amarok and shakes his head, swinging his antlers back and forth disapprovingly. If you continue to seek violence, it will consume you. Not missing a beat, the wolf replies with equal sting. And if you cowardly run from each conflict, you will fade from this world, and no one will remember you or what you refuse to fight for. As the progenitors of the various animal species, the Vitir act as the gods of their kingdom. While still subject to the will of their own creator, the animals of the world are reached more simply by beings that resemble and sound like them. This process is commonly used by divinity in order to reach creations on a more personal level. Deities can become flesh and walk among their creations, looking and speaking just as they do. Given almost free creative reign by their maker, the Vitir have been able to increase Kishar's living population by the millions and develop amazing things that their own creator takes interest. Giving them the blueprints with their own designs, the Vitir made many animals in their own images in order to populate the world and make it less dull for the Yazata to interact with. Some of the Vitir are more experimental than others, producing variations of past creations or making entirely new animals from time to time. Others rarely stray from a successful formula, leaving their species relatively unchanged for millennia. Many Vitir find the lack of creativity boring and criticize their peers for their innovative shortcomings. Gamarita, a turtle-like Vitir, slowly defends her stance on change, explaining that her creations are already perfectly designed and need no improvements. These debates have raged on for so many millions of years that time is of little notice to the immortal beings. Like the Yazata and others born of the Anshar realm, the Vitir cannot die of old age. Only by their life being taken by another may a celestial entity truly die. Design something new. This world grows dull with so many lizards, the Vitir named Nogip says. He extends his sparkling feathers and puffs out his chest. I have designed almost 500 new birds, while you have merely decreased the size and ferocity of a handful of yours. You cannot improve upon a perfect design, Gamarita protests loudly. Elch silences them with a loud snort. Electricity leaps from his antlers. Enough! You have argued this same nonsense 100,000 times with no resolution. We must focus on the problem that faces us all. Why is humanity such a danger? A stork like Vitir named Sionko asks. Humans are the first mortal creatures designed by the Creator himself without our input. How can a mortal creature be given such prestige? That is none of our business. We should not dare to question the one greater than us all, Amrock growls. And why not? Did the Creator design the very Yazata that betrayed him? Did he not design the spirit of evil? Name one being that we have made that has been evil or rebellious. Our creations are driven by instinct and only given a limited amount of knowledge and reasoning. Instinct cannot be manipulated, yet morality is a concept which may vary individual to individual. It is reckless to give these abilities to this new animal and set him so far apart from all the others while still leaving him mortal. Do you think it not cruel to give an animal the same ability to think and reason as a celestial being, yet burden him with all the troubles of all the other animals? The needs of feeding, procreation, thirst, shelter, defecation, territory, these are the things that animals encounter, yet do not have the cognition to be troubled by them, mentally and emotionally. Giving man increased mental functions, but continuing to burden him with the animal needs is a cruelty that one would expect from a devil, not a creator. Elch looks around, seeing that by now many of the others who have gathered to hear him speak are equally outraged. The Creator has also given humans dominion over our labors. Do you understand the implication of this? A mortal being is now ruling over all other mortal beings on a whim of his Creator. Already does this man kill and eat our makings at will. He also skins them to make clothing. He takes their bones and sharpens them into tools to kill us more efficiently. Mankind is a vicious predator, without a natural limiter placed on him as all other animals do. We could design parasites and bacterium to specifically target humanity. A small rodent like Vitir named Hysterico suggests, gnawing on a tree limb. We have already created similar blights to others who were too successful in propagation. It would have to be subtle. The Creator would notice if most of his new men died suddenly from a widespread illness. Do you even hear yourselves? You complain of man hunting and killing your creations, yet you already conspire to murder them by even greater numbers, Amrock accuses angrily. We seek to preserve our children by proactively removing the greatest threat to their survival. By challenging the Creator, we will end up in an even worse position than the Aesir. Even now, Vanicon prepares to lead his contingency into Megaror to assassinate them. The Aesir declared themselves gods and broke away from creation. Do you not think mankind will do the same with as much freedom? The Aesir were given powers greater than even the Yazata, and a freedom to choose their place in the universe. Mankind has been given only enough freedom to choose their personal destinies. They cannot ascend to deification. It is in humanity's nature to oppress and abuse their power. The cruelty of humanity against sentient life is beyond any reasoning. How is humanity's cruelty any more appalling than the lion that kills any cub not his own, the chimpanzee that murders smaller monkeys for nothing more than the thrill of murder and a deterrent to other troops? How is it more cruel than the wasp that lays its eggs in the spider and allows its young to devour their victim from within? What you speak of are instinctual behaviors. No greater thought is put into these actions. Mankind can feel guilt and remorse. They can feel joy and excitement. All beings seek to survive. Self-preservation is a trait shown by even the other celestial beings. Do all other previous creations have more of a right to live than humanity? The reverse must also be true. Does humanity have more of a right to exist than all other animals? For celestial beings with nothing more than time on their hands, involving themselves in human affairs is a relatively common occurrence. Throughout the short span of human history, quasi-deities and other spiritual entities have often made themselves flesh in order to engage in human activities. Some have desired to experience the human condition, first-hand living as they do, while others have merely wanted to engage in strictly carnal activities. Hundreds of times have these celestial beings been observed in the human world, fraternizing with the females of mankind. Stories of Zeus and the other Greek gods as well as those of the Nephilim of the Bible, originated in this manner. The Vitir, too, were known to frequent the human world after living in it for so long. Once man became the dominant life form of the earth, most of the Vitir vanished to live in isolation elsewhere. With so many of their previous creations being destroyed, they cannot stand to witness more die. Many animals are predatory, hunting other species for sustenance. Yet humans from the beginning have been able to form an equilibrium with their world, rather than kill a few animals at a time to eat or clothe themselves. Entire herds would be slaughtered. Man grew to hunt for sport, or proactively eliminate competing predatory species. Habitats would regularly be altered, destroying ecosystems en masse. Created long before man or any other earth-based life form, demigod creatures called the Aesir ruled the universe. The Aesir were the first beings given free will and had used power far greater than any other beings. With their great power that was eclipsed only by the Potestas and the Creator, the Aesir demanded worship and tribute from all other lower beings. The Yazata's unwillingness to worship the Aesir led to the demigods being banished from both the Anshar and the Kishar realms. Due to weaknesses in enforcement of this ban, several Aesir have been able to occasionally return to the earth and gain large followings for time. Great wars have been fought where celestial beings have taken up arms against one another, resulting in thousands of deaths. With this being the only real method of population control for them, these wars have been exceedingly brutal. Very few humans are aware of the history of Earth before mankind's appearance upon it. Those confident in their knowledge of the past speak of dinosaurs, mass extinctions, ice ages, and primordial ooze. What they neglect to mention is the presence of Aesir, large cities, and celestial wars, all taking place thousands of years before the first appearance of man. In reality, the only group of humans who are truly aware of Earth's real history are the magicians and scholars of the magical city hidden in the astral realm in Delgion. Preserved in texts written by the Yazata, the full history of the world is detailed. Since coming into contact with one of these books, and forever having his life changed, Jake Stewart has experienced visions in his dreams. He has witnessed small glimpses of these ancient times, and for reasons still unknown to him, Jake alone has been able to bear witness to scenes never before seen by human eyes. Growing up, Jake's mother taught him about the Christian religion, about a loving son and a no-nonsense, all-powerful father, and the way that God himself became the Son in flesh to save the world. While these events are not necessarily untrue, Jake learns that a great deal of information has been left out by human scribes. Most of the world's polytheistic religions in truth have worshipped one or more of the rogue Aesir gods, as well as several of the monotheistic ones. The monotheistic religions that do express a creator of all tend to only focus on one aspect of him. It is when all these aspects are put together does one begin to see the true progenitor of creation. With each revelation, learning of the existence of the Sakari, the Yazata, the Devilne, the Grigori, and magic, Jake has begun to see the veil of the dark reality of the universe begin to lift. Powerful forces exist just beyond man's senses, and each could put an end to the entire world in a mere instant. Jake awakens with a loud moan. He looks down to find himself in restraints in a dark, basement-like room. Overpowering smell of body odor and heat lets him know that he is not alone. The lingering images of his strange dream hover in his mind. The dreams of the wolf called Amarok have not come to him since before his bonding to Ymura, and he had forgotten all about them. Their resurgence and the devastating loss to the reptilian mutant Rapture make it hard for him to think about anything else. Testing his restraints, he tugs at his hands and feet, but they are given little slack or mobility. A shooting pain rips through his left shoulder, and he remembers his injuries suffered in the previous battle. He holds his head steady, trying to clear out the pained confusion. He wonders how hard his head must have been hit for him to be dreaming of glowing animals arguing philosophy and theology. He hopes that permanent damage has not been sustained. The cans of Rad Raccoon and many cups of coffee likely are not helping with this less than alert mental state. Something is broken loose up there, Jake thinks, scratching his ear. They say dreams all have a meaning and are a gateway to our subconscious. Maybe I should have the meaning interpreted. Jake looks around the dark room and sees very little. Where are we? Jake asks. He hopes that Yamura has noticed more than him before blacking out. I do not know. I came to only seconds before you. Yamura's voice is still full of shame and doubt, and Jake assumes that is due to suffering such a one-sided loss in the battle as they did. I can't see anything, Jake says, trying to survey their surroundings, but seeing only darkness. Yamura remains in control, having come to earlier than his host. Beyond what can be seen, he uses his other senses to feel out their situation. Through smell, he can tell the room is sealed up so tightly that there is no air flowing in. Numerous human bodies consume the limited oxygen and generate further waves of body heat and stench. Judging by the rate from which the oxygen count lowers and the carbon dioxide rises, Yamura guesses that they have less than a day before all usable air is gone. It is a basement of some kind, only one door in or out, and that is made of a thick metal that I could not break through on my own, Yamura says. There are other humans in here, but they are sick, weak, and will provide us with no help escaping. Can you use magic to create us some light? The flames would consume our oxygen too rapidly, and we'd have less time to escape. It will be best for us to discover our exit within the shroud of darkness. Yamura turns to Jake with an accusatory glance. You are the one who escaped from the Yazata book. Can you not get us out of this room? The book was contained in another dimension. Even if I could, cutting into that path would do us no good here. A young, meek voice interrupts their internal conversation. Was it the lizard guy that caught you too? The girl asks. Yamura turns towards the voice, letting his eyes go out of focus, though instead of the darkness, he studies the faint lights reflected by the human's life forces. The girl's light is barely visible, and he can tell by its weakness that she will not last much longer without food or water. Surprising Jake, Yamura switches control over to him in order for him to speak with the other humans without frightening them. Jake smiles, noting the hint of concern in the Sakari for his actions. Yeah, Big Scaly took me down, Jake replies. How long have you been in here? The girl is unsure, pausing for a long time. I don't know. There's no way to tell time in here. A couple of days, I think. They don't feed or water you in here? Jake's outrage is hard to contain. He wants nothing more than to rip out the hearts of not only Rapture, but also Khan himself for being behind these atrocities. With his latest cruelty, Jake is convinced that Khan was directly responsible for the disappearance of his father. They sprayed us with a hose once, but usually the only time they open the door is to take away a few people at a time. The girl pauses again, and they don't ever come back. The implications of the statement are chilling to the teen. Whatever it is Khan does to his prisoners, it's final. Do you know if he kills the people that he takes out of here? We hear screams, but nothing else. One time there was a pounding on the door, and then blood that we could feel with our toes. This poor girl has experienced horrors that no child should ever have to. Children are not immune to atrocities, Yamura says. If anything, they are more susceptible to them. He recalls his own young age, when Marduk's rebellion ignited, and his father was killed. He tries to shield these memories from Jake, but a few of them are picked up by the teen. Help me save these people from that same fate, Jake pleads. The welfare of these apes matters not to me. If we escape, it will be our own preservation and nothing more. When the door opens for them to select more victims, I'll take on the lizard guy while the rest of you rush the exit, Jake tells the frightened people. He'll kill you, and then us, the girl shouts. Jake can hear the tears forming in her voice, and he kneels to comfort her. "What's your name?" Jake asks. He knows he needs to earn the people's trust if their escape is going to be a success. "Mallory," she sobs, trying to compose herself. Jake respects the maturity and is impressed that someone so young is holding herself together, given the circumstances. "It's going to be all right, Mal," Jake says, putting his hand on her shoulder. By her size, he guesses her age to be between 7 and 9 years old. "I'm not going to lose to him again. I almost beat him the first time, and I improve after every fight. He's a monster. He'll tear you apart. My father and mother tried to fight him, and he killed them both. He killed them, and he laughed. He's unstoppable." Jake balls his fists tightly, learning it's too late to stop Khan from ruining this young life. Even if they survive this, she'll forever carry the scars of seeing her parents murdered brutally before her young eyes. His hatred for Rapture grows exponentially, and his aura rises, becoming a visible bluish glow around his body. While the other prisoners cannot see this energy flare up with his emotions, Yamura senses the change from within. If he can channel that rage together, we might just have a chance to defeat that reptilian creature and flee this horrid town. "Tell me a little about yourself, Mal," Jake says, trying to calm both the girl and himself down. "Where are you from? Were you born here?" "Yeah," she nods. "My parents worked at the big factory. Almost all of the grown-ups work there." "Conco," Jake growls, his anger spiking again. "The lizard guy came to our house and told my parents it was time to collect. They got really upset and tried to make him leave. He killed my father first with his tail, then tried to get my mother to give me to him. She refused, and he sliced her with his claws." The questioning backfires, upsetting them both even further. Jake begins to suspect that there is some kind of arrangement between the Conco workers and their employer regarding their children as offerings. "Do you worry that your father was killed for refusing some similar arrangement?" Yamura asks, catching part of Jake's thoughts and most of his unease. "Would make the most sense. I mean, how can all of this be a coincidence now?" The mutated reptilian was surprised to see my transformation. "If Khan were aware of my kind when your father was killed, he would have known what to expect. Do not forget that the scent of my sister lingered on one of the men we encountered in the alley. It is most probable that Inyana has made an alliance with Khan in order to eliminate us as a potential threat to them both." Jake pauses. His emotions are on the verge of collapse. "Then why was my father killed? What reason would Khan have to kill him if not because of me?" "We do not always know the full measure of our father's lives. I regarded my father as proud and strong. I looked up to him for guidance because I saw him as wise. When Inyana and Marduk betrayed him for his throne, even a child such as I saw it coming. My father was warned not to trust Marduk, yet he gave him a seat on his war council as a general. I entreated him to have the leech disposed of, but he would not heed me. It was not until my adult years that I learned my father had put his trust in the Yazata. They had promised to keep Marduk under their thumb, and that killing him would only spark a war with his supporters. Instead, the Yazata were aligned with the usurper all along, and it was one of their own blades that struck my father down." Jake is silenced by Yamura's forthcoming. Never before has the Sakari so freely shared his past or his emotions. He realizes that even monsters like Yamura have lost loved ones and experienced pain. "Mal, I promise we're gonna get out of here. I have a secret weapon that'll help me beat that rotten mutant." "Really?" she asks, surprised. She doesn't believe anyone is as strong as the murderer of her parents. And this boy isn't even a grown-up either. "What kind of weapon?" "I can get mad and unleash an even more ferocious beast on him, an apex predator that feasts on weak little lizards." Delgian, August 8th, 1998. "Just stop me if I become too condescending," Alora says. "I honestly just don't know what you know and what you don't know." Danny shrugs, smiling. She is used to the strange treatment she has been receiving since her arrival. While some regard her as a waste of time, who in 3 years didn't even learn the basics. Others view her as some kind of demon-slaying dark magic protege. It's fine. I'm sure I could use a refresher on even the stuff I do know. Nodding, Allura continues. She visualizes the sigils for fire, wind, water, earth, and spirit, before whispering their names, and drawing both from her inner energy and the strength from the air around her to manifest each of the elements. Tiny wisps of each element dance in the air around the girl, and she lets out a deep, relaxing breath. Every spell requires at least one of the basic elements of the universe as a focal point. Because magic was given to us by the Yazata, it is in their language that we must communicate with the elements. Allura closes her eyes, reshaping each elemental wisp into the shape of their corresponding Yazatan glyph word. You draw the symbol with your mind and use it to focus, as you draw that type of elemental energy from around you into your spell. Once formed, you command the element by its incantation name and transform it into your desired result. Allura continues to reshape the fire elemental until its glyph changes into a new form. Danny recognizes the symbol as the incantation representative of the single fire-based spell that she knows. That's for Agonastra, Danny observes. Allura nods, herself speaking the word and erupting the symbol into a solid swirl of fire. The most skilled magicians can command the elements without having to speak aloud the incantation, but I'm not there yet myself. She dismisses the fire element and draws the wind element closer to her. Mastering wind-based conjuring is more difficult. Wind is wild and is constantly trying to escape confinement. Wind must always seek freedom. She molds the wind into a spinning disc that makes her golden hair flow behind. You can't push the wind too hard into any form. All wind conjuring must be loose, yet still must possess enough structure to hold it together. This element requires a balance of delicacy and control like none of the others. Only practice can teach a magician what is necessary to control the wind. She dismisses the wind element and draws to her the element of water. Water can change far more easily than any other element, but can fall apart without proper strength. A well-cast water spell can be powerful, but a poorly cast water one can be disastrous. Allura reshapes the water element in a curvy, female form mimicking her before dismissing it. Danny is anxious to try her own conjuring of the elements, but is self-conscious after seeing how skillful Allura is. As only an apprentice herself, Danny is intimidated by the level at which an apprentice must be expected to perform. The earth element can be easy or difficult, depending on the caster. For some it's simpler than fire, but for others it proves frustrating. To control the earth element, a magician must have a deep reservoir of physical energy to draw from. It takes a lot of strength to force the earth into any form, and even more to keep it there. Adding the earth element to any spell, if possible, is a way to strengthen its durability. And the last one? Danny asks, pointing to the white glow flickering in the air next to Allura. Spirit, Allura says, dispersing the earth element and calling over the final glowing symbol. Spirit is a dangerous but necessary element to conjuring. This is the element of the universe that animates a spell. Anything one wishes motion upon will require the element of spirit. Too little, and the spell will burn out and fade quickly. Too much, and the spell will gain sentience and all the troubles that come with awareness. A sentient conjuring will no longer serve the caster unquestioningly, and it will have an urge for self-preservation above all. If it comes down to serving its purpose or protecting itself, the sentient spell will guard its own imitation of life. I take it that's a spell that requires a lot of supervision until mastered. Allura nods. There are many less dangerous forms of spirit besides animation. Spirit is the element needed for healing and restorative magics. So all spells can be broken down into these components? Danny asks, surprised by the seeming simplicity of a power so limitless. She had assumed each spell required the memorization of entirely new symbols instead of manipulating the basic elements and remembering the incantation of the combinations. Most, but not all, spells that alter one's perception or thoughts, draw on Yazatan sigils that only roughly translates to our language as dominion, Dominion spells are forbidden for apprentices to perform. Danny assumes her Badare al Controle spell falls under this category, and briefly visualizes the Yazatan symbol taught to her by Schaefer. Drawing the image for her, he explained that all you have to do is focus your energy on picturing the symbol in your mind and say the incantation. After that, you'll be able to manipulate the thoughts and actions of anyone with a will weaker than your own. Defensive magics also employ barrier or binding symbols as their bases. Allure draws the basic symbols for each in the air with her finger, using spirit to animate the words. There are other forms, but the Council won't require you to know these in a third-year evaluation. For a third-year apprentice, the Council will need you to be able to conjure a manifestation of each element as I did and transform it into a minimum of 2 forms. They'll also need you to be able to make multiple elements and mold them simultaneously into more complex spells. Any magic composed of a single element can be easily dismissed by a magician of even minimal skill level. The final test of building complex spells will be that you must weave the elements together and create a completely new spell of your own. Each apprentice is required to show their mastery of the basics by making a new spell, by combining the elements in a unique way. Can I just use Dominion on the Council and convince them that I pass? Danny asks nervously. Only if you think you have more skill and a stronger will than any of the elders. You really need to be able to form these complex spells in order to succeed as a magician. Combining the elements is how truly strong spellcraft is worked. Allure molds the water element into her own curvy form, and then adds the earth element to add physical solidity, and finally a touch of spirit to animate it. In seconds, a rough magical duplicate stands beside her. Allure smiles and gives her clone a high five. You can combine the elements in an infinite number of ways, in degrees, to change your spells. I could remove the earth element and use the clone for evasion, or stand-in for attacks. If you've given something life, is it hard to dismiss it? Danny asks, watching as Allure's clone also looks to its creator for the answer. As long as you haven't placed too much spirit into the spell, the conjurer only has a semblance of life, then it's not actually a living thing. Allure's clone shrugs, continuing to smile, as if finding out she isn't real doesn't bother her at all. Danny assumes that if the conjurer actually possessed a strong will to live in sentience, it would be offended by her casual insult. Allure withdraws a clear orb and uses the element of water and earth to lessen the orb's solidity and change its shape. Casting a variation of binding, she draws her clone into the opened orb and seals it back up, where the spell has broken back into its glowing Yazatan component spells. You can store useful spells in orbs to be utilized at a later time without having to recast. Simply smashing the orb and the spell is released. Finding the method very useful, Danny makes special care to commit the storing process of spells to her memory. Allure pauses in her instruction, and Danny fears a moment she has waited for has finally come. Your turn. I want to see what you can do. Danny focuses inward, relaxing her breathing and allowing her mind to draw the symbol of fire. Feeding the spell with both her energy and the raw energy from the world around her, Danny manifests a flickering ball of fire. Good job, Allure compliments. Now change its form. Increasing her concentration, Danny molds the fire until it takes the shape of a crude disc. No, that's not right. Try harder. Try to make it something more distinguishable. Danny focuses again, flattening the bulges and folding parts of the fire over themselves until it becomes a blunt, weapon-like object. She shaves the edges off with her will until the fire sharpens into a sputtering point. Allure nods in approval. Try to make it into an animal shape, something simple like an insect or a rodent or a snake. Danny compacts the flame and pulls at its ends with her mind, drawing it out into a serpentine form. Awesome work. Now see if you can make it move on its own. Danny tries to picture the element of spirit, but cannot seem to get it into correct way, as nothing happens. Allure sees her struggling and redraws the sigil in the air as a guide for Danny, who again tries. Feeling the symbol beginning to draw on energy, she manifests the element and combines it with her spell to cause the snake to writhe about in the air. Good. Now dismiss it and conjure the wind element. The fire snake vanishes into sparkling embers as Danny ceases to keep her focus on it, and it is replaced by a tiny visible breeze swirling about in place. Danny struggles to keep the wind under control. The element fights against the magician's will, thrashing to escape into the air. "Rein it in," Allure cautions. "Don't let it control you. You must control the element." "Easier said than done," Danny grumbles, sweat running down her face. "You have to master this element or you won't be able to handle the more complicated spellcraft." Inside, Danny thinks that she's been perfectly capable of performing some spells highly regarded as difficult without an understanding of elemental conjuring, but she keeps this to herself. She doesn't wish to argue with Allure, who is only trying to help her. Imitating what she did with the fire element, Danny begins to flatten the wind into a disc. But as the surface area expands, the more violently the wind attempts to escape. Her control is minimal, and Danny's wind breaks apart and disperses. "We'll definitely have to work a lot on that," Allure says, making note of Danny's struggle with the wind element. "You have a lot of physical training and a large amount of energy to draw from. So how about you try conjuring the earth element?" Danny visualizes the symbol for calling upon the element of earth and immediately feels a powerful draining on her energy. Not expecting the feeling, she backs off and releases the conjuring. Trying again, her breathing becomes heavy and she is forced to take another moment to regulate it and get a hold of herself. "Are you okay?" Allure asks, seeing Danny become fatigued. "Can you continue?" "Yeah," Danny coughs. "Just give me a sec." Danny gets her breathing under control and becomes used to the strain on her body the energy taxing creates. Several small pebbles of quartz begin to spin on the ground before coming together into a single mass. Sweating, she continues to focus until the shapes of the rock becomes a long serpent. Next, calling on the element of spirit, she animates the rock snake before dismissing it and dropping to her knees in exhaustion. "That's enough for now. Let's take a break," Allure says. A gathering of teenagers converse about music and life as they roll several marijuana cigarettes. Around them, the forest is dark, save for their small campfire. "Reznor is so much better than that freak Marilyn Manson," one of the teens says. "No way, man. Manson is a modern-day artist," another argues. "He's a cross-dressing faggot who covers terrible 80s songs." The campfire sizzles as the flames reach the older and wetter wood of the lower portions of the pit. The air remains a comfortable 68 degrees, yet without the dancing flames, it becomes increasingly difficult to see through the darkness. The thick tree canopy blocks out the majority of the moonlight, and the woods are far enough from the town that not even the glow of the industrial lights are visible. "Fire's almost out," a tall, dark-haired teenager says. He stands up, taking the initiative to do something about it when no one else speaks up. "I guess I'll go get some wood since no one else seems to care." "Go get some more beer while you're at it," another teenager says, turning his aluminum can of bargain brand beer upside down. Not a single drop comes out of the empty container. "Yeah," the first teen says with irritation. "I will walk back to the truck, drive into town, stop at the liquor store, buy some beer with my non-existent fake ID, and then drive back here in time to pick you losers up and leave again. Try to be faster. I'd like to drink that beer before we have to leave." The first teen throws the last unopened can at his friend, hitting him in the chest. The second teen lets out a whiff of air and barely manages to catch the drink. "Hurry up, the fire is almost out," the second teen adds, laughing as his friend vanishes into the darkness of the woods. Graham Hubbard walks through the forest, picking up dry limbs and twigs, using the light of his cellular phone to guide him. Holding the wood under one arm, he continues to tuck away as many pieces as he can without dropping any. Behind him, a limb snaps, and he turns quickly, hoping that he hasn't wandered into some game trail. Southern Georgia lacks many large predatory animals, but an occasional black bear or coyote isn't out of question in the area. Worse than those, Stumbling into the path of a feral hog would be far more dangerous. Using their large tusks and ill temper, the wild pigs are capable of skewering a human with ease. "Hello?" Graham asks, no one in particular. "Kevin, is that you?" The reply of a small owl and the chirping of crickets is all he can hear. Graham quickens his pace, circling around to double back to the campfire. Heavy animal breathing becomes audible, and begins to run, dropping the collected wood and nearly falling. He stumbles over the limbs, and his right shoulder slams hard into the trunk of a large tree. He bounces off the tree, which keeps him on his feet, and he continues to run, ignoring the spreading pain. Something clubs him in the back, sending Graham tumbling forwards into a creek bed. Warm blood runs down his face, and he tastes the salty, metallic flavor from a busted lip. He tries to climb to his feet, but as he looks up, he is faced with two large yellow eyes, glowing against the black backdrop of the night. "What the hell is taking him so long?" Kevin growls. It's been nearly 30 minutes since Graham went to collect firewood, and the flames of the campfire have dwindled to mere embers in the meantime. "You don't think he took you serious about the beer, do you?" asks Jessica Henry, a thin brunette classmate of the teens, and Kevin's on-again, off-again girlfriend. "No way," Kevin replies, trying to rearrange the embers to keep the fire going for the dozenth time or so. His attempts are unsuccessful, and he curses, kicking at the embers and scattering them out of the pit. The site is instantly doused in blackness, and Jessica opens her phone to give them artificial light. "Nice tantrum. How about getting the fire started again so that Graham can find his way back? He might be lost. These woods go on for miles, and if he took a wrong turn, he could end up walking for hours before ever reaching a road. Graham's been camping in these woods with his parents since he was like 6. He knows them like the back of his hand. There's no way he got lost." "Maybe a bear got him," a second girl, this one short and very petite blonde named Miranda White, says. "I saw a bear one time out fishing with my dad a few years ago." "He didn't get eaten by a bear," Kevin sighs loudly, before wincing in pain, as he quickly tosses several hot coals back into the fire pit with his bare hands. The final member of their trip sits up, having passed out earlier in the night. "Graham got eaten by a bear?" Timothy Russert asks, heavily intoxicated. "That sucks." Kevin shakes his head in annoyance, trying to use his lighter to ignite the small amount of kindling he managed to collect and sprinkle atop the embers. A pair of yellow eyes flashes briefly, only noticed by him. "Miranda, watch out!" Kevin shouts just as a clawed hand emerges from the darkness and wraps around her mouth. The girl is pulled back out of sight without a sound. "What the hell was that?" Jessica screams, waving her phone around to try and see better. "It's a goddamn Sam Squanch!" Timothy shouts with a loud belch. He stumbles to his feet, nearly falling into the fire pit. Jessica looks over at the drunk, contemplating his answer in her fearful state. "Could it be?" she whispers, looking back at Kevin. "Don't be ridiculous!" Kevin shouts, picking up one of the large embers and holding it out like a club. Ignoring the heat, he stares forward and listens for any unusual sounds. "There's no such things as fucking Sam Squanches." A hand reaches out for Timothy, but he stumbles, falling into the fire pit. Screaming, the teen thrashes about until he is able to crawl from the pit and roll on the ground. Kevin lunges as Timothy falls, the wooden cub exploding on contact with the hard body of their attacker. The glow of Jessica's phone swings towards them, briefly illuminating the figure for an instant, before he turns and charges at her. She screams as the massive reptilian form of Rapture runs at her, tackling her into the darkness. Her phone drops to the grass, face down, and smothers the light. "Did you see that monster?" Timothy shouts, standing up. "What the hell is that?" "It doesn't matter. Run for the truck," Kevin screams, grabbing Jessica's phone as he dashes past and holds it out in front of him as a weak flashlight. From behind, Kevin hears Timothy rasping to keep up, but falling further behind. The teen lets out a piercing shriek as he too is pulled off into the night. Kevin alone reaches the truck and flings the door open, throwing himself inside and turning the engine over as fast as he can. As the engine rumbles, a loud crash sounds out as something inhumanly large lands in the truck's bed. A clawed hand shatters through the glass behind Kevin's head, and with a forceful jerk, the teen is pulled from the vehicle screaming. Restraining the final teenager in the back of the van, Rapture turns back to his human form with relief. His chest heaves up and down from prolonged parasitic agitation. Sweat beads run down the man's face and pool on the leaf litter below. Remove the truck from the area and have it broken down for scrap, Shesha tells the armed operatives accompanying him from the Special Operations Force. We don't need some hillbilly tracking a deer to stumble on it and raise suspicions. He pulls out his phone and makes a few brief calls, alerting both Khan and the lead scientist of the projects of his success. I have another group of volunteers ready for your next tests, Dr. Smith. Please don't burn through these as quickly as the last. We're reaching the critical points where the disappearances are beginning to draw attention, Shesha says into his phone before closing it. Finish cleaning up so we can move out. Clavemont High School, August 9th, 1998. Colorful streamers hang down from every ceiling tile and window. Hand-drawn signs depicting triumphant cavaliers standing atop piles of unconscious, anthropomorphic cougar-headed football players decorate the halls. First game of their season being their season opener, the entire community shows their support by displaying banners and other advertisements and promotions. Mira's Diner, a local eatery, has even renamed several of its popular dishes after starting members of the varsity team. Throughout the halls, students scramble to put up confidence-boosting posters for the football team's game against their neighboring rival, the Barrington Cougars. At the bottoms of the posters are business sponsors of the team. A large Gothic-style K with mechanical designs and a DNA double helix wrapped around it dwarfs all other logos. Conco is the major economic support system for the community, which is originally founded as a town built specifically to house the business's employees. Son of two senior Conco researchers, Brian Rude rushes down the halls past the dangling decorations. I shouldn't have spent so long in the library. I'm going to be late. As Brian jogs past the glitter and paint jungle, he truly feels like he is in another land. The others around him seem as though he is a foreign species that they cannot completely understand. Cheerleaders look up from their posters, eyeing him like a lost traveler in a strange land. Each day of the week is given a separate theme as voted on by the school council. The day of the game is always Pride Day. On this day, all of the students and staff are encouraged to wear the school colors, and even face painting is tolerated for the truly school-spirited. Rather than wearing the yellow and black of the Cavaliers, Brian sports a red t-shirt with a graphical design of the comic book hero Iron Man. He has always been fascinated by superhero comics, and possesses several boxes of them in his room. Far-out space adventures with the Fantastic Four, more human stories about overcoming discrimination and prejudice with the X-Men, dark tales of hellish villains and revenge with Spawn, of overcoming adversity, and adhering to a strong sense of morality and responsibility with Spider-Man, and surreal stories of an unbeatable Man of Steel and Superman draw him out of a life he hates and puts him in a fantasy world that he can forget about the real world. The look he receives for wearing a comic book shirt instead of the school colors are ones that convey hatred and disgust. He wonders why some of his classmates go so crazy over sporting events and the popularity of those involved. Most of them will never speak to each other again after graduation, and likely, none of them will be very successful in college or business. Nice shirt, dweeb, a mousy brunette cheerleader laughs. Her friends chime in with giggles and other quieted taunts, but Brian ignores them. If being teased by girls who think they are better than him, or harassed by the jocks that want to impress those same girls, were something that still affected him, he'd given up school a long time ago. Don't let them bother you, his father would always tell him. If you show them that they are bothering you, they'll only go after you that much harder. While his father was often helpful with advice, Brian's mother rarely displayed any kind of interest or emotions towards him. So immersed in her work, Deborah Rood has had little time for anything else. The only moments he can get her to acknowledge his existence are those when he approaches her with a question about some scientific process or theory. A parent is expected to unconditionally love, but Brian often wonders whether his mother even cares about him at all. Sometimes he wishes for something bad to happen, some great catastrophe that will remove the obstacles from his life and would make things so much easier. He knows he shouldn't have these thoughts, but he cannot help it. An enormous, Godzilla-like creature could come crashing through the town and step on the school. He doesn't think that he would even care. The only people he would wish to be spared would be Lucy and his father. Anyone else can be eaten or stepped on for all he cares. He tries to suppress these negative thoughts, fearing they would lead to a much darker path. Thoughts that may lead to action. While he would not be upset if his tormentors were removed, he could not bear to think that he could be the direct cause of their ill fates. A brunette senior cheerleader stands on a ladder putting up a few banners to stretch across the hallway. Butch runs up the stairs as Brian passes, shoving the smaller teenager out of the way with both hands. "Watch where I'm walking, nerd," Butch shouts, laughing. Brian's shoulder slams into the ladder, sending a sharp pain down the length of his arm. The ladder begins to wobble, and the cheerleader screams in terror, trying not to lose her balance. Unable to stop her fall, the girl is thrown to the floor. Her head hits the ground, and her eyes immediately roll back into her skull, as blood begins to ooze from her ears, nose, and lips. Her left leg lies twisted beneath her broken form. Coach E runs into the hallway, having heard the screams. "What's happening out here?" He looks around to see Brian and the cheerleader both on the floor. "Get the nurse, now!" he screams at the gathering crowd of onlookers. Brian sits up, wincing in pain. "I was trying to get to class, and Butch pushed me into the ladder and she fell off." "Liar! I heard Lisa making fun of him, and then he got mad and knocked her off the ladder," Butch argues. "It's true. I saw the same thing," Tiny says, walking up to them. Brian begins to protest, but is cut off by Coach E. "Go to the principal this instant. We'll deal with you later." He kneels, checking Lisa's pulse and breathing. She's still alive, but that damn nurse needs to hurry. Butch grabs Brian by the shirt and pulls him in closely. "You're dead for this one, pissant." In Principal Priest's office, Brian nervously shifts uncomfortably in the small chair as Mr. Priest removes his glasses and massages his forehead with his fingers. Coach Etheridge is a former all-star football coach. His loyalties lie with those barbarians. Butch pushed me into the ladder, and Coach E refuses to see his jocks as anything but perfect little angels. Butch and his friends do this kind of stuff to me every day, and no one will do a goddamn thing about it. Lisa Jordan's parents may press charges against the school for her injuries. The poor girl is catatonic and may never come out of her coma. And I get to be the scapegoat in all this because Butch Harper says so. Mr. Priest sighs loudly and puts his glasses back on. There is going to be a tremendous backlash. I suggest you don't go anywhere without supervision. Trust me, I've already heard all the death threats there are to hear. Butch and his friends are not the type to bluff. He will hunt you down and hurt you if he gets a hold of you. Mr. Priest comes out from behind his desk and places an arm on Brian's shoulder. You'll survive this and graduate and never come back to this town again. You keep saying things like this will be okay, but what exactly are you going to do to help me? This is not an exaggeration. You're not doing your job. Your duty is to protect the students under your supervision. Brian takes a step around the principal's desk, startling Mr. Priest. Never did he picture the timid pushover and regular target of bullying, challenging him in this way. I think you need to step back and reevaluate the situation you find yourself faced with. If I were in your position, I would be doing my best to stay in the graces of the administration. The students are out for your blood now. To them, the truth is irrelevant. The popular kid is never wrong. The masses will rally around Butch and the cheerleaders and incite as much inflammatory hatred and rhetoric as they can against you. Mr. Priest moves towards Brian again, so that they are only inches apart, to stress that the principal is not going to tolerate the students' demands or attitude. The teaching staff over the next few days may be the only thing that will be keeping you alive. Please think about that when you're selecting your enemies. Laughing out loud, Brian surprises the principal. I get it now. I never saw it before, but now I see it all too clearly. What are you going on about? Mr. Priest asks with irritation. You're afraid of the school board, the administrators, and the football boosters. They bully you around. You're no different from me. Listen here, young man. What you are implying is a serious accusation. I am no way pressured into any of my decisions by bullying. The look in the flustered principal's eyes tells Brian that his assumptions are correct, and he continues. If you actually care about this school, you'll start cleaning up the messes you've allowed to accumulate due to your fear of bureaucracy and small-town politics. Butch Harper doesn't just give guys like me swirlies and atomic wedgies. He's an incredibly deranged sexual deviant that abuses us physically, mentally, and sexually. Yes, I said sexually. Do you want to be on the heavy end of a lawsuit when the ACLU comes calling? Butch beats us, parades us around naked, has guys forced to touch each other in front of girls, and dozens of even more despicable acts. This isn't just humiliation. This is the kind of shit that scars people for life and creates serial killers. Butch Harper is a sadistic sexual predator, and he needs to be stopped before one of his victims retaliates against him, the school, or against themselves. Mr. Priest is stunned by the emotion with which Brian speaks. He finds it hard to believe that this is the same teen from even a few weeks earlier. Is all the abuse of Butch transforming Brian's personality? He wonders. The principal questions the truth of the items addressed. If they are even partially true, he knows he must investigate. Despite what Brian thinks, Mr. Priest does not want any of that kind of behavior to continue. Do not leave the sight of any teacher or administrator at any time. I will begin a full investigation into the accusations you have made against Butch. If I find out any of them are true, I will make sure the authorities are alerted and charges are pressed. Brian remembers that due to failing 8th grade, Butch is already 18. If he is found guilty of the charges, he will be sent to jail. The teen smiles at the thought, hoping Butch will be paired up with some very lonely sexual predator that is much larger and more demanding than himself. Clavemont High School, August 10th, 1998. The students sit down by their grade level in divided sections to be ready for the cheering contest, held by the varsity cheerleading squad later on in the rally. Student body president Kimberly Gilbert steps in front of the microphone. She is tall and firm in expressions as well as body tone. All business. She keeps her mouse brown hair up in a tight bun and displays her school spirit in the most modest of professional-looking red silk blouses and a knee-length black skirt. She adjusts her glasses before addressing the crowd of her peers. A few items before our assembly begins, she says in her most administrative voice. The winning pride class has been voted on by all members of the student government. Congratulations to the sophomore class and the representatives Sarah Biggs and Michelle Culver. The winning class will be given an extra $100 for their prom budget and a full-color ad in the yearbook. She clears her throat and continues. Several of the more restless students in the upper rows begin to complain and heckle her, drawing an icy glare. Kimberly turns to Principal Priest. Please get their information for being disruptive. The principal merely nods, his mind elsewhere, and still preoccupied with the growing number of student disappearances. Tickets go on sale Monday for the Drama Club's production of Death of a Salesman for only $5. Please see Mr. Lewis if you're interested. Her voice suddenly becomes high-pitched and cheerfully enthusiastic. Go Cavs, she adds, pumping a fist in the air and holding up her index finger to indicate the number 1. The sophomore class representative steps up next to make a few brief announcements. Thanks to all of you who participated in Pride Week. It was a great turnout and the best we've had in the school's history, the dark-haired and pimple-faced Michelle Culver says. Every class participated and received votes, so the competition was really close. But we won, so let's hear it for the class of 2000, Sarah Biggs, a short, heavy-set redhead, shouts. The section of the assembly belonging to the millennial class goes wild. Several students in full makeup and costumes cheer the loudest. Their enthusiasm is a great contributor to their class's winning effort. If anyone in the class of 2000 wishes to add their thoughts and ideas for the yearbook ad, or how to spend our prom funds, please speak to either of us or attend one of the student council's open forums, Michelle adds. In the back hallway, leading to the locker rooms, the football players stand awaiting their cue to run out into the gymnasium. Where the hell is the new guy? Butch asks, irritated. I thought he was going to help us get that big W tonight. Tiny looks around, not seeing Jake. You know, I haven't seen him around at all since that first day. You don't think he's fallen victim to the disappearances like all the others, do you? Butch is quiet for a moment, wondering if any of them are safe. Nah, he probably just bitched out. Fucking Yankees don't have the same kind of balls we got down south. That's why Bama, Georgia, and Auburn, they thrash any northern team they ever face. Yeah, Tiny whispers. You're probably right. It just sucks he turned out to be a coward. We could have really used his muscle. Butch grins. We got everything we fucking need to get the W right here in the hallway, boys. The assistant principal, a gruff-looking man with a downward-pointing mustache that resembles tusks, steps up to the microphone, all but pushing the girls out of the way. Before we begin, I need to go over the required disciplinary procedures for this rally and the game following, Mr. Walker growls. There will be no toleration of alcoholic beverages or tobacco products on school property. Anyone caught will be suspended for the remainder of the school year. If one of your parents or other adults violates these rules, the police will be on hand to remove them and to press charges. Many students began to loudly boo, forcing Mr. Walker into a deadly glare. The students tremble, feeling a deep chill, as if he is able to single them out and stare directly at them. No PDA displays will be tolerated. Last year, 2 students were suspended for making out behind the concession stand. We will be watching. Pervert! A student shouts. That's Henry Townsend, Mr. Walker whispers to another staff member, who waves for the student to be removed from the event. He again addresses the crowd at large. No vandalization will be tolerated. The students, staff, and fans of Barrington are coming here expecting a display of good sportsmanship and respect. Any attempt to make the school or city look foolish will be dealt with severely. Principal Priest pats Mr. Walker on the back and whispers to him. All right, you scared them enough. Let's move on to other matters. Mr. Walker nods and steps away from the microphone to loud cheering. I will not go on ad nauseum, but I do wish to convey a very important message, he says, his voice still maintaining a hint of distraction, as if his thoughts are far off on another topic. Tonight, and every other night, I urge each of you to be alert and cautious. Do not put yourselves in dangerous or questionable situations. Please go everywhere with a group of 2 or more, and never go off alone. These are very troubling times, and I do not wish to add any more of you to that list of missing persons. I also ask that each of you, regardless of belief system, to please pray for the safety and well-being of all your peers currently lost. Pray for their safe and expedient return, and for no further disappearances to occur. Thank you. The students clap uncomfortably. They, like the principal, are deeply saddened and left scared by the disappearances. With so many missing, they have no idea what exactly they are supposed to think or feel. How many schools in history have really had to deal with such an epidemic? When the principal is finished, the football team runs out to a standing ovation. How my seniors doing? Butch shouts into the mic to increase cheers. Brian's neighbor and only friend, Lucy Davis, looks over at him as he remains seated during the assembly. Not cheering, Brian? She asks. Would you? They're all selfish brutes that hate my guts and want to see said guts used as decorations for the pep rally. Are you really not going to the game tomorrow? Lucy asks, munching on a fry as she speaks. Of course not. I hate Butch and all of his asshole friends. I hope they get raped out there. Then come just hang out with me, Lucy says, pouting and making him a ridiculously exaggerated sad face. Butch continues his speech, getting the crowd pumped up into a frenzy. If y'all don't come to the game, then you're losers. The gals will be coming out in a sec, so you better scream louder than ever. Got that? Now Lisa won't be with them. As you probably already heard, she's in the hospital in a coma. She was seriously hurt in a ruthless and unwarranted attack by that scrawny little bitch Ryan Brood. The crowd boos loudly and begins to throw anything they can towards Brian, who is escorted out by the faculty for his protection. Butch grins at his work and hands the microphone off to Brittany Neal, the cheerlead squad's captain. "What's up, Cavaliers?" she screams into the microphone. Rick brings Lynn a cup of coffee, 2 sugars, and vanilla cream. The young woman sits at her already cluttered desk, reading Dr. Smith's latest diagnostic test. She doesn't look up, gladly reaching out and taking the needed caffeine. "Thanks, you're a lifesaver," she says, her face still buried in papers. "Mr. Kahn said the microtechnology expert will be by today to implant a processor into the biosuit," Rick says, relaying the message. "You seem to be following the project pretty well. I'd assumed I was getting strictly a barista, not a scientist in training," Lynn says with a smile, looking up. "It's all really interesting, and I'll admit a lot of the technical stuff is over my head, but I'm catching the gist of it. What I don't understand is how the device is powered. I haven't seen anything detailing a battery or propulsion system." "Well, this may sound crazy, but the system is actually charged by excess outputs of the wearer's physical energy stored in specifically designated cells. That's why it's a biologically based enhancement. It's running off a person's own energy." Rick is stunned, having never expected that answer. It steals your energy? Khan surrounds himself with such powerful warriors, but a suit like this in his possession is capable of untold destruction. "Where are you from, Rick? You told me you've only been in town for a week or so, but didn't say where from," Lynn asks, enjoying being able to talk to someone closer to her own age. Most of Khan's other employees are stuffy scientists and technicians that have worked for the company most of their professional lives. "Just from up north. I needed a fresh start." "Did you run away?" "From a certain perspective, maybe. My father deployed, and I couldn't stand to be at the house alone anymore." Lynn debates calling the police. She could tell immediately that he was lying about his age. She wonders what exactly it was that he was running from. "Sorry, you just look awful young. No harm meant," he finally says, deciding on a more tactful approach. If Rick is a runaway, he could be running from an abusive household, and the last thing she wants is to have the authorities place him back into a hell he has fought to escape from. "None taken. You don't look like an old maid yourself. You can't be much older than me." She's flattered by his compliment, but hopes that there isn't more behind it than kindness. She doesn't need right now to become romantically entangled, and besides, she still doesn't believe he is being completely truthful with his age. Yielding to him could mean prison if she isn't careful. "I graduated early from advanced placement classes in high school. By the time I started college, I'd already taken like 50 credits. I got my bachelor's in like 2 years and my master's in another year and a half. So yeah, I'm almost 22 and have 3 degrees. It's usually pretty intimidating to most people. Most guys hit on me until I start talking and then slowly lose interest when they realize my breasts are attached to a postdoctorate degree. So no offense, but I've heard every flirt and come on invented by man." "Whoa, dial back the touchiness, Miss Chip on the Shoulder. I just said you looked young. I didn't ask you to follow me into the broom closet." Lynn suddenly feels embarrassed. She is so used to being defensive from being hit on by every guy who thinks he's an alpha male that any time a guy is nice to her, she is constantly on her guard and reacts as much. "Let's start over and pretend I never noticed you were attractive," Rick says, smiling. Lynn nods. "Where did you go to school at?" "I'm originally from just outside Chicago, but my father moved us around a few times being in the military." Oh yeah? What branch? I'm a military brat too. My mom was in the Air Force. He was in the Navy, Special Forces. He didn't really talk about his service much, but I think it was something different from the SEALs. I guess he wasn't allowed to talk about it. He's retired now. My mother lost a leg in Desert Storm. She doesn't talk about her service much either. She mostly just talks to her friends, Jack and Jim. Just you two? Rick asks, hoping he isn't intruding by probing further. My younger brother and sister. I still try to see them as often as I can, but things get rough when my mom has been drinking. What happened to your father? Rick asks. He's relieved to hear that someone else has a similarly messed up family story, but feels guilty quickly after. He knows that he shouldn't feel happiness in someone's sorrow. He left when I was 16, after Mom returned from Iraq, a sorry mess. He was a coward and couldn't cope with his new life. I'll be glad if I never see that bastard again. He could have helped Mom deal with her trauma, but him bailing turned her to the bottle. Lynn sees that Rick is stunned by her outburst and does her best to dial it back before going a little forward. What about the rest of your family? Did they adjust to your father's military service as well? Well enough. Rick's voice grows cold. A sorrow and pain rises up in him, and he visibly changes. Until we were attacked, my mother was murdered, and my brother and I were taken captive. I escaped, but my brother... Rick suddenly catches himself, revealing too much, and stops abruptly. He prays that she doesn't probe him any further. Lynn may be easy on the eyes and easier to talk to, but for all he knows, she is one of Khan's most loyal assets, and will turn him over the second she learns his true motives for being there. Lynn pauses before responding. She is unable to immediately process the information she hears. Your mother was murdered? Who could have done such a thing? Her hand goes to her mouth in horror at the thought. I've said too much, Rick says. He shuts down the conversation completely. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Nodding, Lynn changes the subject. What made you choose here for your internship? There really aren't many good universities anywhere. Khan and my family have some history. Lynn notices his voice is still cold, and wonders if this internship and his mother's murder are somehow related. Could his mother have been some secret lover of Khan's? Was she a whistleblower on toxic waste being illegally dumped into the Gulf? Her mind flies through scenario after scenario, her imagination running wild. Due to reading excessively in her free time, Lynn tends to picture situations far less likely than occur in real life. She's guilty of frequent daydreams, and her mind going off track with distractions. She and Rick continue to bond, but all the while she wonders what dark secret it is that has brought the team to Conco. Brian dashes down the sidewalk after school, desperately trying to reach his home without any altercations. Every shadow past fills him with unease. At any moment, one of his numerous tormentors could spring out and resume their daily abuse. Were the bullying merely physical or mental, he could overcome it, but the combination of both is too much for the teen to handle. Being told how worthless you are and how no one loves you or will ever do so is exponentially compounded while that aggressor is punching you in the face. The beatings are far more worse than the most bullied teens are forced to deal with. 3 times Brian has been hospitalized for concussions sustained at the hands of Butch Harper and gotten stitches twice. On one of those instances, he received 10 stitches in his back from where a bicycle was picked up and used against him as a melee weapon. Butch has forced him to eat human feces from a dog's water dish. Stripped down naked in front of the cheerleaders, them how much he likes to choke on throbbing members. How can one build any confidence with girls during their awkward teenage years when they are humiliated sexually in front of them? The girls giggle and point, some commenting on the less than impressive size of his manhood. Butch enjoys every moment, absorbing Brian's misery like some kind of gratification solar panel. The bushes rustle, and the teen's pace quickens. He prays each day to reach his home without a confrontation. More days than not, his prayers go unanswered, filling him with a skepticism and a higher power. His parents do nothing to help alleviate his pain. Brian's mother ignores him altogether, while his father's advice to stay away from his bullies is neither helpful nor practical. When your tormentor is obsessed over torturing you and going out of his way to find and abuse you, there is no reality to staying away from them. Brian suspects that his father was probably bullied to an extent, but nowhere near the level that he has been for several years now. The complete disconnect of his parents is disheartening and keeps his hopes each day for a good day low. At his darkest times, after a particularly severe beating or humiliation, Brian has contemplated ending it all. Easy it would be to finally stop Butch's sick games. No one would mourn his passing. Brian guesses that more would celebrate his death and be sad over it. His friend Lucy alone would shed a tear if Brian were to take his own life. Perhaps his father might be saddened, but he knows his mother would not even take notice. When self-pity and depression are overtaken by anger and resentment, Brian pictures making a change in an entirely different fashion. Rather than taking his own life, Brian sometimes fantasizes giving back to Butch all of the pain and anguish that he has inflicted over the years. A disturbing feeling of joy comes with the thought, followed by overwhelming guilt. He knows that he should not think of doing evil to anyone, but he finds it nearly impossible to not wish the very worst fate to fall upon Butch for all that he has done. If karma exists, and people get what they deserve eventually, Butch Harper is going to suffer horrors unknown to civilized mankind. "Where are you going in such a hurry, nerd?" Stacy asks, emerging ahead of him from the bushes. "Just leave me alone," Brian screams, near tears. Caught up in deep thought, he is caught unaware by her emergence. "Or what? You gonna knock me down and put me in a coma, too?" She laughs as she puts a cigarette out to her lips and lights it. "Truth only works in favor of people who already have favor to begin with. You're a nobody. You could die today and no one would care." Brian balls his fist in a mixture of anger and fear. "Don't act tough, you little shit." Stacy punches him across the face, knocking him to the pavement. "Remember, that's your place. Down there." "Why did he push me into her?" Brian whispers, spitting up a mouthful of blood. "Stupid little bitch cheated on him. She deserved everything she got." "He wanted her to get hurt," Brian thinks in horror. "He used me against her." A black sedan pulls into the back lot of Conco Factory, located an hour outside of Clavemont. From the entrance of the building, 7 men in black BDUs carrying automatic rifles escort the research team and Rick Swanson inside. Rick scans the greeting committee with unease. Every one of these guards is stronger than a normal human. Khan has chosen this force to protect this facility. The importance of what is being hidden here must surely be great. Once inside, Rick is taken by surprise at the plethora of strange medical equipment all around him, while Lynn and the others go straight to work without pause. A row of tanks, resembling upright phone booths, line one wall, and Rick wonders on their purpose. A man in his late 30s with reddish-colored hair and an unshaven face approaches them, removing his glasses and putting them in his pocket, before extending his hand in greeting to each of the members of the research team. "So good to see you all again," Dr. Smith says in greeting. "I know I have been very busy these past few days, but we have made many breakthroughs in the project that were worth my full attention." Smith looks around, not knowing several of the people in the room. "I don't believe that I've met all of you before." Several of the research team has worked in isolation on their sections of the project so as to not have distractions. "This is the first time we are bringing all of the component pieces together," Shisha says, leaning against a wall beside the doctor. "Can you introduce everyone?" Lynn asks Rick quietly. Rick nods, having gotten to know each of the scientists from frequent coffee and lunch orders. "As you already know, she's a mega brain, a mega babe, and a Capricorn. She's also a human genetics specialist if you care. To her right, with the long shaggy hair, is Dr. Thomas Jenkins. He likes candlelit dinners and Bob Dylan. He is a geophysical microtechnology developer with over 36 patents. Excellent. You must be the man designing the operating system for the biosuit, Dr. Smith says excitedly. It'll have 4 times the processing power of a standard civilian device, yet smaller than a calculator, Dr. Jenkins gloatingly replies. The next guy is Dr. Victor Silva, virologist from UT Health Houston. He's one of the top scientists in his field, but I've come to realize that is a big part of Khan's hiring criteria. He's published in 19 journals and magazines, and co-authored a paper under review by the CDC that will revolutionize how diseases are identified and quarantined, Rick continues, pointing to a quiet, dark-haired man beside Jenkins. Next to him is Dr. Tyrell Blackthorne. He's the head athletic trainer for the Florida State University football team and an amateur marathon athlete. He holds the NCAA record for 400 meter. Very good. All areas of expertise have been covered. We can now begin. Dr. Smith turns to greet the large Asian man that Lynn mistook for the janitor of the Conco building. Allow me to introduce Dr. Han Hayanaro. He is the director of operations for Conco and will be overseeing this phase of the project as the liaison to Mr. Khan directly. He motions towards 3 of the other scientists already in the room. And these are the project supervisors, Deborah Rude, Jonas Rude, and Raquel Melendez. Tonight is the figurative birth of a baby they have been carrying for much longer than 9 months. So let's see to it that we do not mess things up for them. Silva points to a strange assortment of yellow and blue metallic components set out across the table. Wires are connected to the pieces, running directly into a canister of glowing green liquid on ice. What is that? Silva asks. I think it's the ooze, Rick whispers, but no one but Lynn manages a chuckle. That, my friends, is the purpose of our little science summit. Separately, each of you have worked on your little pieces of the puzzle. Tonight, we come together and create the full picture, Hayanaro explains. That is the virtual biosuit, a device that is powered by the wearer's own energy. A potentially endless powered device that will revolutionize military operations overseas. When resources are low, this armor will not consume batteries or fuel, yet will boost the physical abilities of its wearer. I believe we are ready for the human trials to begin, Deborah says. Shesha leads several of his armed guards in from the back room with several unconscious teenagers. All of the research team minus Silva shudder in horror, realizing instantly that these are not volunteers in any sense of the word. What's going on? Why do you have those kids tied up? Jenkins shouts. I didn't agree to be any part of illegal activity. Hayanaro leans his head towards the supervisors. Is Dr. Jenkins' microchip technology fully integrated? Deborah nods slowly. We have no further use for the man. Pulling out a handgun, Hayanaro shoots Jenkins between the eye once, without hesitation. Blood splatters onto Lynn's cheek and she begins to scream hysterically. Tyrell and Rick both slide into fighting stances, pushing the screaming woman behind them. Silva stands beside the wall, merely blinking in disbelief. I was led to believe that I would be working with conditioning of veterans and other volunteers who signed up for the program to receive portions of the biosuit as replacement limbs. You never said anything about abducting teenagers, Tyrell shouts. What kind of depraved shit are you people into? Get her and Silva out of here, Rick whispers. I'll hold them off. Tyrell narrows his eyes on the confident young man. You knew about this, didn't you? Go! I'll explain later. Rick shuts out his physical senses and allows his ability to detect energy to take over. Both Hayanaro and Shesha glow brightly, burning fires in a room with little more than the equivalent of fireflies appearing as the other occupants. He suddenly catches sight of another almost equally bright flame down below in the basement of some kind. I could tell you were different the second you stepped foot into our building, Shesha says, approaching Rick, flanked by 6 armed guards. Rick studies his situation. Each of the guards are highly trained, with auras brightly flashing through his honed senses. Any one of the men could likely bring down an experienced combat unit, and Rick guesses they're all boosted by either the parasite or by Sakari blood. I could probably take the support team, but I'd still have to deal with the yellow-eyed powerhouse and the fat Asian guy, Rick thinks in frustration. I really didn't plan for things to go south so fast. Rick glances behind him to make sure Lynn and Tyrell are still safely behind. I never even really got a chance to look around this place. His attention is drawn back to the aura, shut away below them. If that's Thomas, I'll never really know. I have to check it out, as this may be my only chance to get this far into one of their research facilities. Don't touch anything metal, Rick whispers to the scientists. A slight wind rushes around the young man's body. His energy begins to focus. Hidden away inside its cells, the GX parasite receives its cue to increase his metabolic energy output and spur a mutation. He has the parasite in him, Deborah observes. How can someone we are unaware of come to possess it? Perhaps Hartman's spies have infiltrated us more than we suspected, Raquel says. They may have already stolen a specimen without our knowledge. All they'd need is a blood sample of someone already infected with GX. Any one of the Special Operations Force could have betrayed us for a large enough payout, Jonas adds. Her husband's idea seems the most plausible, and unfortunately the hardest to prove. Shesha, take him alive. We need him for questioning. While his opponent is distracted, Rick slams his hands together and creates a field of electrostatic energy that he discharges in a pulse. The guards are knocked to the floor. Shesha is staggered back several steps. This boy has an annoying sting, Shesha growls, his adrenaline causing him to begin his transformation. I will rip you apart, piece by piece. I don't care that they want you alive. The parasite mutates him into a hulking, reptilian monstrosity. Rick again discharges another electrostatic pulse, but Rapture allows it to hit his palm, where it explodes into a cloud of steam. A few blackened scales crumble away, but the mutant has already begun to regenerate from the attack. I have to get past him and open that basement to see for myself who it is they're trying to keep locked away, Rick thinks, glancing past Rapture several times, grinding his teeth together in pain as he digs his fingernails into his chest. Rick releases several streams of bright red blood to flow. Collecting some blood into his palm, Rick flings it at Rapture and splatters it across the mutant warrior's chest, right arm, and both feet. What? Rapture growls. Disgusting little wretch. Utilizing the parasite's powers, Rick transforms the trace metals in his own blood into lightning rods that pierce Rapture at each point of contact. Screaming, he unleashes another, stronger electrostatic pulse that is drawn immediately to the rods. The magnified blast flashes blindingly and lights up the large warrior with enough voltage to kill 100 men. Rapture drops to a knee, smoke rising from its blackened body. Get up, you worthless lizard, Deborah orders. He's going to steal the biosuit. The thought of stealing the device had never previously entered Rick's thoughts, but his eyes are now drawn over to the table where the armor sits unprotected. No, I have to stay on task. Finding Thomas is all that matters right now. Rick's muscles bulge, and his veins protrude as he concentrates his energy into his hands before firing a massive beam directly towards the metal doors holding the prisoners in. Yamura senses the energy rushing towards them and counters with his own Vasaiya energy blast. The two energies collide against the doorway and create enough force to blow it apart. Black fire pours out of the holding cell, spreading throughout the warehouse like a flood. Two guards are hit by the flames. Their screams echo into the forest as their bodies are burned up. Thinking quickly, Yamura activates Seal Acelair, absorbs the fallen energy of the men into himself in the form of runic tattoos on his arms. A quartet of guards rush forward, unleashing a torrent of bullets on the Sakari. Several of the prisoners run out from behind Yamura and struck down by the gunfire. Waving his hand towards the attackers, Yamura sends a wall of flame out at them. More screams fill the air, and Khan loses 4 more of his hired muscle. The Sakari is very impressive, Deborah notes, watching from the catwalk, suspended above the action on the second floor. He's able to control his energy like a living flame. None of our soldiers have exhibited any power similar to that. Demonic powers are far different from parasitically enhanced humans. We have no idea the upper limits they are capable of. Then Rapture will be earning his salary for once tonight. Through him, we will gather a more satisfying collection of data. Rapture is still wounded from the youngster Khan so foolishly sent here with the specialists. The teenagers working in tandem will kill him before we learn anything. I've already thought about that possibility, Deborah says with a grin, pointing to her phone. Additional operatives are en route from a nearby location and will arrive shortly. Yamura darts forward, slapping the arm of a guard and causing him to shoot into the floor. Yamura's hand slides up his arm and delivers a knife-hand chop to the throat. As the man falls, the Sakari pivots and uses his body as a shield to absorb more gunfire before kicking it into a group of approaching foes. Kept in isolation for several days, Yamura continues to attack with a bloodthirsty ferocity that Khan's men are unable to counteract. Mallory and the other prisoners slowly begin to emerge from the shadows and are spotted by Rick. Disappointed that he was unable to locate his brother, the safety of these innocent prisoners becomes foremost in his mind. "Get them out of here," Rick shouts to Lynn and Tyrell. "Don't stop until you get them someplace safe, far away from here." Rapture's tail wraps around Rick's face, covering his mouth and abruptly ending his leadership. With a quick movement, Rapture slams the teen to the hard floor. Cracks snake through the concrete, and Rick claws at Rapture's tail desperately as his mouth fills with blood and oxygen is knocked from him. Yamura sidesteps an advancing guard and slams his fist against the man's cheek. Dropping into a crouch, he sweeps the guard's legs and delivers an elbow to his sternum as he falls. Another guard manages to connect with a fixed-blade combat knife, tearing through the muscle of Yamura's right bicep with 4.5 inches of surgical steel. Growling, Yamura pivots and delivers a roundhouse kick to the face. A seal acylaire tattoo disappears into Yamura's aura, healing his injury. "It seems the Sakari also has a regenerative capability similar to our own Rapture," Deborah observes with fascination. "He is a very durable creature. I wonder if all Sakari are so difficult to kill." "It's different from Rapture's healing. He seems to require those symbols to absorb before he can recover. It looks to me more like some kind of magic," Jonah says in response. Deborah scoffs at his statement. "There's no such thing as magic. There's only science that has not yet been explained." Yamura drives a knee up under the chin of a guard before using the man's chest to spring into a backflip over two more just as they open fire. The Sakari delivers expertly placed strikes to the neck and back of the men's heads, causing all three men to fall to the floor simultaneously. Rick's face begins to darken, and his movements become more frantic. Activating the parasite in his blood, he attempts to transform the trace metals within his body into another lightning rod to jam into Rapture's flesh. Rapture grabs both of Rick's arms and pulls them slowly while extending his tail. Rick's body is stretched painfully, but the teen is still unable to scream with Rapture's tail covering his mouth. Suddenly, Rapture's tail is severed in a flash of blood, and Rick drops to the floor coughing as he unwraps the appendage from constricting him. "You and I still have a duel that was interrupted," Yamura growls. "You're mistaken," Rapture hisses, his tail beginning to regenerate. "I completely destroyed you in our previous encounter. Locking me away is one of the worst possible things that one can do to me," Yamura says, holding his claws out to the sides and baring his fangs. "I was sealed away for so long that imprisonment only fuels my rage." The Sakari's battle-tested eyes have already marked the weakened locations in Rapture's scales where the lightning rods earlier pierced. He calls forth the symbol for the element of fire in his mind and manifests it into several explosive bursts, targeting only those spots singled out in his opponent. Blood and chunks of flesh splatter outwards from the blasts and bring the larger warrior to the floor in agony. "Die," Yamura growls, lowering his hand to the back of Rapture's head when he is forced to suddenly somersault backwards in evasion of his opponent's tail. "That damn tail," he hisses. Yamura hisses, having overlooked the rapid regeneration of the appendage as a determining factor. Back on his feet, Yamura rushes the reptilian warrior, throwing dozens of quick punches and kicks. Rapture is overwhelmed with the Sakari's superior speed, taking the brunt of the attacks. Again, he relies on his tail, sweeping Yamura's feet and bringing it back down into his chest as he falls. Yamura rolls over his shoulder on impact, hopping away from any further attacks. He concentrates his aura into his fists, reducing the wild black flames into swirling masses of more manageable energy. Rapture lunges with a slash of his claws, but the quicker Sakari dives at an angle and rolls under a swing before coming up with an uppercut to the ribs. Rapture howls in pain and pivots with a backhand that would take a man's head off should it connect. Yamura leans back and rolls on his heels, spinning himself to maneuver behind his larger foe. Yamura strikes hard with both fists, directly into the center of Rapture's back, and staggers the mutant. Swatting with his tail, Rapture catches Yamura under the chin and sends him flipping backward into a row of computers. Sparks explode on impact as Yamura's back is met by the hard plastic casings of the equipment. "You've improved," Rapture says, panting with exhaustion. It's been years since he's had to push himself so much to keep up with an opponent. Yamura crawls to his feet and calls up the symbols for fog and fire, combining them before infusing the elements of fire and spirit. "Dandai, Aginestra!" Yamura shouts, conjuring a shroud of combustible fog to fill the room and reduce visibility to 0. Able to cast fire from any part of the fog, Yamura hits Rapture from all sides with fiery, phantom blows. I guess he has it all under control, Rick thinks, having recovered and begun to observe the battle as an onlooker. Knowing he can do no good in his position, he makes a run for the door to check on the escape progress of Lynn and Tyrell. Emerging into the night air, Rick is greeted by carnage. The ground is blackened by dozens of bodies lying strewn about and motionless. All of the nearby trees have been melted, and the ground itself is sunken into numerous small craters. One of the prisoners stirs, trying to crawl to his feet, but his body suddenly erupts into flames. "I don't like having to hold back. It makes me sloppy," a tall and thin man with dyed red hair, a pair of protective goggles, and a tight-fitting flame-retardant suit says. "If the directors had just told me to kill them all, it'd be a lot less messy. The whole point of collecting these people is to use them as test subjects. They aren't your own personal shooting range," a second figure says, sitting on a branch of one of the burned-up trees. This figure is dressed in regular clothing that would not indicate him being a warrior at all, let alone harboring special abilities. Rick trembles with anger and disbelief at the two men's cruelty. Letting his eyes go out of focus and his extra senses to take over, he sees that almost half of the motionless people are still clinging to life. Small flickers of life that are barely visible. If he wants them to survive, he must act quickly and take out the two new fighters. "Is this the demon we were supposed to take out?" Fission asks, combusting two flames into his open hands. Unlike magic, where the elements and symbols must be visualized and mentally arranged, the parasite inside of him has evolved to be able to convert anything he touches or sees into a combustible reaction, including air particles. "If Rapture couldn't take this runt down, I'll be very disappointed," Breeze replies. "What's your name, kid?" Fission asks. Rick throws his arms out, flinging several drops of his own blood at the man. As the blood flies to the air, Rick activates the parasite inside of him to transform the trace metals into electrically conductive rods. Fission hurls his fireballs, exploding each projectile. "He has powers too. I didn't realize there were people with GX that aren't on Khan's speed dial." Rick tries to spark electrical lightning beneath Fission, but he blocks with a chain of explosions as he leaps backwards to safety, unleashing electricity from his fingertips. Rick is again stopped by a series of explosions between them. Breeze vanishes, breaking his body apart into component particles, and reassembling them behind Rick and locking him into a full Nelson hold. "As much as I'd like to know who the mystery kid is, he is the only one we weren't given specific orders not to kill." Fission grins, combusting small explosions on Rick's chest, thighs, and arms. Rick screams in pain, dropping to his knees with smoke rolling off his injuries. Yamura emerges from the warehouse, dragging a bloodied Rapture by the tail. He pauses at the sight of the destruction outside. "Mallory!" Jake screams, catching sight of the little girl face down and motionless in the dirt. "Are you the one responsible for this?" Yumura asks, cocking his head towards Fission. Who the fuck are you? Fission growls, choosing the best spots visually to explode on his new victim. He selects Yumura's face first, as the eyes bother him greatly. He wants to burn those eyes out before killing him. Yumura darts at Fission, dodging with incredible speed and not breaking stride as the air around him explodes in short bursts. Fission is shocked that he is unable to hit his opponent, and uses all of his strength and detonates the air all around him in a circle. Yumura drops down from above the explosion, raking his claws diagonally across Fission's chest. Staggered by pain and shock, Fission manages to impressively counterattack and detonate Yumura's right shoulder and part of his back, as that is all he is able to see at the time. Yumura turns, ignoring the pain and slashing open Fission's midsection. Blood erupts forth, followed by the dripping wet chunks of organs splattering to the ground. Fission blinks in disbelief several times before trying to take a step back and collapsing to his side. Bree shouts in surprise, witnessing his partner's death. This distraction allows Rick to throw his head back and break the grip. Breeze curses as blood runs down his nose. Screw the directors, I'm killing both of you, Breeze screams, disassembling his body into a living current of wind. He's going to try and sneak up on you, Rick shouts. Smiling, Yumura spins on his heels and snatches something out of the air with almost undetectable speed. Crushing the object in his hands, blood drips from his palm to the ground. Breeze does not put himself back together, and instead scatters into the natural winds. Rick is in awe of the Sakari's power, taking out both of the professional killers in a few seconds. Something about him seems terribly familiar. Yumura glances down at the wounded prisoners and then back up at Rick. Without another word, Yumura turns and walks back into the warehouse, where Rapture still lies in a heap at the doorway. Understandably, Rick gathers up the people two at a time and sprints to the forest towards the nearest home he can find to leave them at until contacting an ambulance. Racing through the forest, he reaches an old farmhouse in a clearing. The only road leading out is dirt and not well traveled. Judging the area to be isolated enough to be safe for the moment, he sets the first few civilians down and looks inside the home through the large windows framing it. The interior is dark, and he lets his eyes go out of focus enough to block out all distractions, and hones his other senses on searching for any signs of life inside. A small flicker of blue light glows from within one of the rooms, and he quickly opens the door and sets the people on the floor. Hearing the noise, an elderly woman enters the room and turns the light switch on. Frightened and confused, the woman reaches for her landline telephone. Please wait, Rick begs, extending his hand out. There are a lot of hurt people out here. I need to get them to a hospital, but please don't make any phone calls to 911 or the local authorities. I don't know how much of this town Khan has in his pocket. Khan? Antonio Khan? The owner of the pharmaceutical company? What's this got to do with him? Her hand remains near the phone and leaves Rick anxious. Everything. Look, I can't explain now. There are just a lot of innocent people who are depending on us getting them to medical care. We're about 10 miles from the county line. I can call the hospital over in Medina. I go there sometimes from my back. Bless you, Rick shouts, overjoyed at finally catching a break. I have to go get the rest of them. Thank you again. As soon as Rick leaves, the old woman picks up her phone and dials. The little punk came by here just like you expected. It's not like he has anywhere else to go but here. Hayanaro laughs on the other end. I'm sending a few operatives your way to take care of him. Just play along. To keep trespassers out and anyone trying to escape in. Phyllis Yorn is Khan's gatekeeper and most camouflaged operative. Something about people, he's discovered, is that they automatically let their defenses down when faced with an elderly old woman. With grandmotherly traits and a helpful demeanor, Rick too has fallen for Phyllis's act. Making several trips back and forth, he brings everyone over to her farmhouse. Carrying Mallory and Tyrell in his arms, Rick reaches the clearing for the last time and pauses. In the distance, he senses 3 strong presences and waiting. The energies are spread out in a perimeter in an attempt to box him in. His instincts tell him to flee, but he fears for the safety of the people he has already left behind. "I'm sorry," Rick whispers, taking the two still in his arms further through the woods towards town. The nearest of those in waiting moves to cut off his escape, but Rick quickly sets Tyrell down and unleashes a burst of static electricity from his fingers and catches the man in the chest, causing him to hit several tree limbs and fall to the ground stunned. Picking Tyrell back up, Rick dashes off, leaping branch to keep out of sight. Dragging Rapture inside, Yamura fails to notice that the reptilian mutant has recovered and feigns his weakened state. Seizing upon that, Rapture wraps his tail around Yamura's neck and jerks him forwards. Yamura's face smashes into the floor, and Rapture springs back to his feet before leaping onto the downed Sakari's back. All of Rapture's massive weight drives down onto Yamura. The sounds of multiple bones cracking sing a gruesome symphony into the night air. "You let your guard down," Rapture laughs, jumping up and down several times to increase screams of agony. Yamura flips onto his back, consuming Rapture with a two-handed burst of Aganestra magical fire. The flames lash at the reptilian, quickly burning through even his tough armor-plated scales. Yamura fights to stay conscious as the pain and exhaustion are overwhelming. Releasing a seal acellar tattoo, he heals his broken bones and collapses to his back, spent. Rapture drops to his knees, badly burnt. Chunks of melted flesh drip to the floor with sickening plops. All of the mutation scales have been burned away, and his flesh is left raw and severely burned. Using the remainder of his strength, Rapture heals his wounds, but falls to his face, reverted back to his human form. Neither fighter moves. "Put a bullet in both of their heads," Deborah growls in irritation, turning to the guard nearest her. Jonas merely shakes his head in disbelief at the aftermath of the furious battle. "I can't believe that boy pushed Rapture so hard. I thought for sure he'd be killed almost instantly." "It says a lot to the endurance and ability of a Sakari. I can see why incorporating one into this program has suddenly become so necessary," Raquel adds. Deborah taps fingers on the railing impatiently, before turning again to the nearest guard. She stares deeply into the man's eyes, until a spark leaps between them, and he reaches for his gun. Like a cobra, Deborah continues to entrance the man. "Shoot them both," she commands. The guard nods, aiming his gun down at the motionless fighters. Hayanaro pulls out his own handgun and shoots the guard in the head before he can fire. He looks over at Deborah with disapproval. "No more of that. We can't go wasting our resources so recklessly." Cursing under her breath, Deborah lets the matter drop. Down below, Shesha is the first to stir. His skin is healed over, but his energy is depleted such that he must remain in human form. Every inch of his body is sore, and he feels as if he has been run through a meat grinder, and then shoved in an oven on high to roast for hours. He looks over at Jake as the teen also begins to move. "Son of a bitch is still alive?" Shesha says aloud in frustration. "What does it take to kill one of these bastards?" Before he can deliver any killing blow, Jake is back up on his feet. Unsteady, Jake wobbles and tries to clear the static from his vision. "Good," Jake says, noticing Shesha is back in his human form. "I was hoping you weren't any better off than me." Both exhausted, Jake and Shesha eye each other carefully. Each fighter knows that the first to make a move impatiently may pay for their mistake with their life. Leaping at Shesha, Jake attempts to hit him with a kick to the face, but the more experienced warrior sidesteps and backhands him across the face. Jake throws his weight backwards and barely manages to land on his feet, stumbling several steps. Blood steadily drips from the teenager's nostrils, and he wipes his face with his forearm, smearing red across it. "He is stronger than most elite Sakari. You cannot hope to defeat him without my help. We must buy time to recover, so that I may regain control and finish him," Imura says, his voice weak and barely present. "I can't rely on you. I still have no guarantee that you won't side with these freaks and kill everyone, not after all you've done in the past. You fool, we will both die." "All right, Leatherhead, let's finish this," Jake says with a grin, revealing his blood-stained teeth. Shesha stares at his young opponent in intrigue. The boy's concentration, demeanor, and even his style constantly fluctuate, making it difficult to gauge him. Jake leaps at him again, throwing a roundhouse kick to the side of the head, but Shesha grabs him by the ankle. Unable to break free of the larger man's grip, Jake throws his torso back and posts his hands on the floor, using his momentum to break Shesha's hold and hurl the man across the room. Flipping in the air, Shesha's feet slam into the far wall before he pushes back off and lands in a crouch that leaves an impact crater on the floor. A deep fissure runs up the wall from Shesha's impact, weakening the building's structural integrity. "You aren't half bad, kid. I've fought and killed many experienced warriors, and most have fared worse than you." Jake refuses to take his eyes off Shesha, trying to keep his stance light and mobile. The man's strength and speed are tremendous, and he knows that a single mistake would be costly. "I guess I just have that little something extra," Jake grins. "Not enough extra," Shesha replies, his body having recovered enough to undergo transformation once more. His skin begins to pale to a greenish-brown color. His body mass increases, and his height grows by over a foot, to put the man easily over 7 foot tall. Long claws elongate from his fingertips and keratinize into a thick, black plating. Shesha's head transforms into a elongated snout, and his fang-like teeth protrude from his jaws like a crocodile. From the corner of the room, Victor Silva continues to watch with interest. "I can't believe that Khan already has found a way to mutate human beings into monstrous super soldiers. If I can get a hold of their secret, there will be no limit to the bargaining power I'll gain." Jake suppresses the urge, moving through his body to tremble. The pressure of Shesha's immense aura presses upon him and makes it difficult to breathe. Sweat runs down Jake's forehead, and he swallows hard, only to find his throat completely dry. How did he recover so fast? It almost feels like he's actually even stronger than before. Jake clenches his fist tightly and continues to sweat. "Impressed," Rapture hisses, the sounds of his S's lingering in the air. A thick, muscular tail slams the ground behind him and shatters the concrete to tiny pebbles. Rapture appears inches from Jake before the boy can even register his movement. Unable to mount a defensive maneuver, Rapture's tail wraps around Jake's neck and lifts him off the floor. "You may be a decent fighter for a child, but you are nothing to a warrior of my caliber. But with the proper push, that could be changed." Jake claws at Rapture's tail as his oxygen readily diminishes. His skin color gains a bluish tint, and his eyes begin to roll back inside of his head. Having strangled countless victims to death, Rapture knows that Jake's end is quickening. He barely feels Jake's nails digging into the meaty flesh of his tail, as there are few nerve endings present in the bulky appendage. "Yamura, don't let me down," Jake says, slipping into unconsciousness. Rapture feels Jake go limp in his grasp, but continues to squeeze, just to make sure there is no life left in him, and that he isn't playing possum. Jake's eyes snap open, now completely red and without pupils. Rapture feels a strong pressure pushing back into him, and he strains to maintain his grip. "Why has the Sakari's demonic aura returned? He has nothing left." Now controlled by Yamura again, Jake's hair stands on end. Tips darken to an oily-looking black color. His muscles swell and define to a much greater degree, and his fingernails lengthen into sharp claws. Yamura grabs the base of Rapture's tail and pulls as hard as he can, ripping it from the monster's body in a flash of blood and tiny bits of flesh. Rapture howls in pain and stumbles forward as Yamura unwraps the appendage from his neck and tosses it to the floor. "What are you?" Rapture growls, turning to face Yamura. "How have you recovered so fast?" His chest heaves up and down. Blood steadily drips from his backside. "I have to keep the pressure on. I am not at full strength." Yamura smiles, raises his hand, the palm turned outwards. "Basa Ia." Rapture's tail is combusted into flames by a burst of black-colored energy. "I underestimated you. You are much more gifted than I realized." Yamura continues to hold his hand out towards Rapture. The posture is threatening, and neither warrior moves for what seems an eternity. It would be such a waste to kill you. Your talents will be very beneficial to this organization. I am slave to no one. I forge my own path. Unseen by Yamura, Rapture's tail stub has ceased bleeding and begun to regenerate. Suddenly, Rapture pivots and whips his newly formed tail across Yamura's front. The Sakari hops backwards and narrowly avoids the contact. Your high-speed regeneration is very useful in combat. In my world, we have large reptiles that can also heal their injuries quickly. This is the reason we use them as our combat mounts in war. A barrage of arrows or the slash of a sword to the legs will not permanently maim them, as would a hoofed steed. I believe you to be slightly more evolved than a Upus, though. Yamura peppers Rapture with half a dozen Basa Ia energy pulses. Rapture covers his core with his forearms, which are burdened down to the bones, and smoke rolls off his entire body. A terrible stench fills the air, and Yamura grins as Rapture shakes in pain, dropping to a knee. The Sakari rushes to flank Rapture, thrusting his palm down to the monster's face. Rapture trips Yamura with his tail and causes him to stumble. Forced to post one hand and flip to the side to keep from falling, Yamura lands beside Rapture just as the beast stands up to his full height. Almost fully healed, Rapture glares at his foe in hatred. No damage you inflict on me will be able to kill me. You are incapable of victory. Yamura raises his hands, putting both together and focusing his aura into his palms. I find that claim rather difficult to believe. I do not think that you will be able to heal any wound, not one severe enough. Yamura releases a massive energy blast that catches the left side of Rapture and dissolves part of his torso, his entire left arm, and the top of his thigh. Go ahead and heal yourself now if you can. Yamura laughs. I am curious to see your power's limitations. Within 2 minutes, Rapture's body has begun to regenerate, and in 4 he is back on its feet. A smile is stretched across his crocodilian snout. He rushes at Yamura, headbutting him before the Sakari can raise his arms in defense. A thrumming pain vibrates through Yamura's skull, and he curses the fragility of the human body. Blood runs down Yamura's nose, and he squints, his vision clouding slightly. Rapture does not relent and give his opponent any recovery, instead hammering with a two-fisted strike that catches Yamura at the base of his jaw on the left side. Yamura is tossed into the air and disoriented, and Rapture quickly slams his tail down into his chest. Yamura shouts out in pain, but no sound escapes. Only a mixture of blood and saliva emerge. Yamura hits the floor and rolls to his feet, only to be kneed in the face by his faster opponent. Somersaulting backwards to lessen the impact, Yamura releases several Basa Ia energy blasts that Rapture merely swats away with his hand. His face now covered in blood, Yamura struggles to remain steady on his feet. He lunges with the right hook, but Rapture grabs him by the arm, using his tail, and punches him in the exposed ribs. A sickening crunch echoes throughout the facility as Yamura's ribs are crushed. Blood explodes from his lips, and Rapture backhands him to the floor. Whispering a Sakari chant, Yamura releases a Seal Acelerator tattoo and heals his non-fatal injuries, and slowly stands back up for another round. His energy is still depleted, and he doubts his ability to succeed at this point. He channels his energy into 2 more Basa Ia energy orbs, which swirl in his hands violently. Your previous use of this technique has already failed. Why do you again attempt it? Yamura smiles, slamming the orbs together and shaping the energy with his mind into a spear-like projectile that he condenses solid with intense focus. He rushes forwards, slashing with an overhead swing. Rapture brings his arm up to block, but the energy weapon cuts through his flesh with a sizzle. He whips his tail around to force Yamura back as he winces in pain and concentrates on regeneration. His arm doesn't bleed for long, and shortly begins to reform. Yamura again advances, ducking beneath Rapture's tail and bringing his weapon across the larger opponent's midsection. Rapture hops back at the last second, reducing the damage to a shallow cut. Yamura pushes the advantage again, but each time he cuts his foe and he regenerates. He feels his own strength wane. As he reaches his limit, Yamura's movements slow, and Rapture is able to evade each attack with ease. Becoming more of a burden to keep it active, Yamura releases his energy weapon back into his aura. Rapture wraps his tail around Yamura's ankle as he evades a claw slash, and causes him to stumble. Yamura shifts and tries to counter, but receives a solid combo of jabs to the face. Disoriented, Yamura staggers before falling to a knee. Noticing his opponent's weakness, Rapture maneuvers behind him and ends the fight with one final kick to the back of the head that topples Yamura to the floor unconscious. Yamura's hair returns to normal, and the oily black sheen recedes back into his scalp. Get him strapped down quickly before he awakens. Rapture orders the remaining guards, relaxing back to his human form. Lynn moans, awakening on the floor of the Conco facility, hidden in the forest of Clavemont. She stands, leaning on a nearby table for support, and sees herself surrounded by armed guards. I want to leave, she says, her voice trembling. Hayanara laughs, motioning for the nearest guard to aim his rifle at her. How and when you leave is entirely up to you. We have further use for you, so if you are cooperative, we will not be forced to make your exit a gruesome one. Who are you monsters? Lynn whispers. Is it the parasite that has mutated you all and made you lose your humanity and compassion? Deborah's teeth grind together in irritation. Is this little bitch's assistance that necessary? She's grating on my nerves. Lynn Jordan is a young protege. It would be a waste to allow her talents to be extinguished before they fully mature. Just give her some time to comprehend this, Jonas urges. She is too emotional. Her concern for the lives of others will interfere with her duties as a researcher. Struggling to take in the madness around her, Lynn begins to cry. She does not make a spectacle of her tears, sobbing loudly or shrieking. The young woman merely allows herself to weep in light of her fear for herself and of everyone else unwillingly caught up in the Khan's terror. With no instinct for violence, Lynn is the farthest thing from a warrior. She solves conflicts through reasoned discussion and debate. Often she appeals to the emotions of those who seek to resolve problems through physical force. Even now, in a hopeless situation, surrounded by parasitically enhanced creatures, she cannot force herself to think of doing these men harm. Of her co-workers should be enough to make them cease their plans to bring harm upon innocent citizens, abducted against their will. These people have families. They're worrying where they are, and if they are safe. Please release them all back to their loved ones, Lynn cries. This is beyond wrong. No one should be made to do anything against their will. Just a little pinch, Deborah growls. I can shut her body down to keep her mind alive long enough to extract anything useful. No, we're done killing our own resources so needlessly, Jonas argues, irritated by his wife's vicious nature. Most of the time he is equally fearful and disgusted by her. Why are you so compassionate towards this girl? Do you find her desirable? Is that it? I don't care if you play with her. Just let me shut her up first. Her puppies, kittens, and rainbow speeches are going to make me suicidal. Appalled by the insinuation, Jonas storms off to get another cup of coffee. Miss Jordan, our work is very important and cannot be performed within the restraints of law or morality. Hainaro's phone rings, and he stops to answer it. Yes, sir. He closes the phone back and instructs a guard to go up to the catwalk and speak with the 3 supervisors. It seems the time has come to push our project into its final stage. The recovered volunteers are wheeled into the room along with Jake. Each is strapped to a gurney, with Jake's being reinforced by steel restraints. Too many times have their patients awoken in the past to allow for another disaster. Multiple delays have already altered the timetable for Project VR and the Clavemont project. Khan himself has been very vocal that he will tolerate no further mistakes. Tonight he must see results, or else.